Hi, I'm Rowena. At this year's family gathering, my sister raised her glass, smiled, and called me a pathetic failure right in front of everyone. And no one blinked. Not my mother, not my brother. But what they didn't know was that I owned the company they were all there to celebrate. How did I end up being erased from a legacy I helped save? And how long can a family pretend you don't exist before you remind them, legally and publicly, that you do? Stay with me. This story doesn't start with betrayal, it starts with silence. The text from my mother arrived on a Tuesday morning, casual, clipped, and entirely predictable. Dinner's at 6 this year. Don't be late, Rowena. No, how are you? No hope to see you, just logistics. As usual. For 8 consecutive Thanksgivings, I'd shown up. Not because I was wanted, because it was expected. The obligation clung to me like Arizona dust dry, invisible and inescapable. I knew exactly how the night would unfold. Red clay tiles, polished countertops no one was allowed to touch. Dinners dressed up like award shows. And me, the extra chair they always forgot to count until I walked through the door. I pulled into the driveway 15 minutes early, parked behind Callista's pristine Lexus, and stared at the front door. I could already feel the stiffness in my shoulders setting in. Another performance was about to begin. The door swung open before I knocked. My mother, Irene, wore her trademark holiday smile tight-lipped and surgically polite. "Oh, good. You brought wine," she said, taking the bottle without a glance. She didn't ask how I was. Inside, the same tension-filled warmth hovered in the air. The kind of cheer where everyone smiles just a little too wide. I set the Pinot Noir on the counter like an offering to gods I no longer prayed to. Callista's voice floated in from the den, smooth and rehearsed. "Rowena's here? Well, there's a miracle," she called out, laughter trailing behind her words. "Still figuring life out, huh?" I walked into the kitchen to help with the appetizers, but I might as well have been a stranger. My mother was already delegating tasks to Callista, to Caroline, her golden daughter-in-law, but not me. Eventually, I picked up a tray of deviled eggs and carried them out, hoping someone would notice I still knew how to be useful. At dinner, I was seated at the far end of the table, same spot as every year, right between the sideboard and the wall, the kind of seat you give to a polite inconvenience. From there, I had a clear view of the show. Callista was in full form, her hair professionally blown out, makeup perfect, her voice just the right blend of modesty and self-promotion. "I've been invited to consult for a new startup in San Francisco," she said, slicing her turkey like it was a victory trophy. "After my last TEDx, they said I have a gift for translating brand purpose into market presence." Aunt Molly clapped. Uncle Raymond murmured something about legacy. And then someone, probably well-meaning, maybe a little tipsy, asked me, "And what have you been working on, Rowena?" I opened my mouth, but Callista beat me to it. "She's between things," she said with a laugh. "Not everyone's built to build, right?" Then she turned to me directly. "Some people just analyze from the sidelines. It's cute." The laughter that followed wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. My mother chuckled lightly, then looked down at her plate. No one defended me. No one said a word. My chest felt hollow, like all the air in the room had been sucked into that moment and left me behind. I took a sip of wine. It didn't help. The rest of the meal blurred. Conversations about stocks, vacation homes, influencer deals. I watched Callista pass out instructions for cleanup like a commander handing out orders. "Be a darling, Ro," she said, pushing a stack of wine glasses toward me. "Just like old times. Rinse these, will you?" I froze. Everyone laughed. Not maliciously, not overtly. Just the way people laugh when they've decided someone's harmless. I carried the glasses to the sink. Standing there, scrubbing crystal under 2 bright lights, I felt 15 again. Invisible, unchosen, useful only when convenient. I thought about the graduation ceremony where no one showed up. The startup pitch I was proud of that was met with blank stares. The job offers, the promotion, the nights spent finishing deals so big they saved companies. None of it mattered at that table. I was just the sister who brought the wine and washed the glassware. I wiped my hands, poured myself another glass, and returned to the dining room. Nobody looked up. As I sat back down, something shifted not in them, but in me. It wasn't rage, it wasn't sadness. It was something quieter, sharper. I smiled, not out of politeness, out of recognition. They had no idea who I really was. Not yet. The next morning arrived with too much sun. That kind of Arizona light that makes everything look sharper than it should. I sat at my small desk by the window, not touching the cold coffee I'd poured an hour earlier. The apartment was quiet, intentionally so. I'd muted every thread, turned off all alerts. I didn't need a replay of last night from anyone else. My own mind was doing a fine enough job. Callista's voice kept looping in my head, that bright, polished tone she used when she wanted to sting without leaving a bruise. Some people just analyze from the sidelines. It's cute. The chuckles around the table had faded quickly, but the silence afterward, that silence stayed with me. Nobody stood up for me, not even my mother. My phone lit up. One new voicemail. "Rowena!" Mom's voice started, clipped and vaguely scolding. "You always take things too personally. Your sister didn't mean it like that." I let the message play through, blinking at the screen, jaw tight. A second later, I called her back. I spoke evenly, choosing each word as if it might be counted against me. I told her it wasn't about being too sensitive. It was about being disrespected. Her sigh on the other end was louder than her words. "Rowena, come on! You've always been so competitive with Callista. I think you're just jealous." Jealous. That word landed with such dull familiarity, I didn't even flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just ended the call. It wasn't anger I felt, it was fatigue. The kind you collect over years of being politely excluded. I turned back to my desk, trying to shift my mind, but instead found myself pulling out a stack of clippings from the drawer. I'd kept them, not for vanity, but as a reminder of what I had actually done. Headlines, reports. One particular article stood out. Under 40 and building big, Arizona's rising power players. My photo, my firm, my team. I remembered mailing a copy to my parents that Christmas, framed and wrapped. I'd placed it quietly under the tree. I found it weeks later, still wrapped, still sealed, pushed behind the sofa table like an unwanted relic. That memory got interrupted by another ping from my phone. A social media notification. Callista had posted. Big, bold letters. "Grateful for everyone behind this journey. Couldn't have done it without my team." I tapped to see the tags. Her PR director, her photographer, even her interior designer. Then my name flashed, and just as quickly, disappeared. The tag had been added, then removed. It wasn't an accident. I knew that. I also knew better than to ask. I set my phone face down and sat there, palms open on my lap, like someone waiting for news they already knew was bad. I wasn't hurt this time. I was done being surprised. I stood and walked to the filing cabinet tucked behind the sliding door in my living room. Unlocked it. Pulled out a manila folder labeled in Sharpie. Contingency. Inside, my documented equity stake. The valuation analysis I'd done at 3 a.m. 2 years ago when their numbers started falling apart. Contracts, board communications, time-stamped revisions, all clean, all airtight. Silas had helped me structure it quietly, legally. He never asked why. Now I finally knew the answer. They weren't just pretending I didn't contribute. They were rewriting history so I'd never been there. I closed the folder, placed it on my lap, and stared at the golden lines of sun crawling up the opposite wall. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was correction. "They won't see it coming," I whispered to no one, "because they've never seen me at all." I stood, turned off my phone for the rest of the day, and poured a fresh cup of coffee. I stared at my reflection in the window, not sad. Not angry, just done pretending. The valuation sheet still sat open on my screen when I got up the next morning. The numbers, neat and solid, had comforted me the night before, cold. Clear facts that couldn't be spun into something else. I didn't touch the keyboard. I just sat there with my coffee, the air conditioner humming above me, and the city coming alive outside the window. Scottsdale always felt sharper after a confrontation. Maybe it was the way the light bounced off concrete, making shadows look more honest. Or maybe it was just that after every holiday gathering, I felt the same things, dripped down to the kind of silence people mistake for peace. I got dressed without thinking too hard, choosing a navy dress I'd worn to the last annual board review. My role in the company was discreet by design oversight and finance, but I had every right to walk into that building and ask questions. No one could argue that. Not yet. The elevator ride to the top floor of the company's flagship office felt longer than usual. The assistant at reception greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome back, Ms. Mercer. The audit package is already waiting in the conference room." "Thank you," I said. But my gaze landed on the hallway just beyond Huron, the wall of framed photographs. There, next to the large canvas of Callista on stage in Singapore, was a newer piece. A family shot, color-corrected and elegant. My father in the center, Callista on one side, a blurred background behind them. It took a second for the realization to land. That was our old photo, the one taken 5 years ago after the launch of our first retail location. I had been standing to my father's left in that original frame. Now, cropped, as if I'd never existed in it at all. The receptionist noticed me looking. "Oh, that piece was updated recently. New direction, clean branding." She smiled again, a little tighter. "It's all about story now, you know?" "Yes." I knew. I walked past without another word, a low hum pressing against my ribs, the kind of ache that only lives where dignity used to be. In the conference room, I went through the audit like I was checking off a grocery list. Nothing was wrong, nothing glaring. But the photo stayed with me, burning at the edge of my vision. Later that afternoon, I returned to my apartment and sat at my kitchen island, trying to write emails but watching the cursor blink instead. At some point, a delivery arrived. A small black box tied with ribbon. Inside, a minimalist leather notebook and a gold pen. A card read, "Happy birthday, Rowena." From the team. The handwriting belonged to Callista's assistant. The signature was hers. I stared at it for a long moment, then opened my expense tracking app. I searched Employee Wellness Program, found the line item, found the approval date, my signature, my protocol. I created this system 2 years ago, gift boxes for every staff birthday, funded by an internal initiative I had quietly set up and maintained. It was meant to build morale. Now it had looped back to me, unrecognizable, like a stranger returning my own coat and pretending it was theirs. "I built this," I whispered, voice flat. "And they still send it to me, like I should be grateful. I didn't throw the box away. I didn't keep it either." I set it down next to the audit folder, side by side with all the other documents no one thought I had the sense to save. Instead of reacting, I opened the locked drawer in my bedroom, pulled out the sealed file marked contingency, laid it across the desk, scanned each document with methodical focus, backed up everything to an encrypted drive, created a new folder, final prep. Not rage, not even grief, strategy. Later that evening, I sat with my phone in hand, looking at the cropped photo I'd taken earlier. I zoomed in slowly, focusing on the empty space beside my father. I knew that space. I'd occupied it in more ways than one. They had taken me out of the frame, but not out of the picture. "You erased me once," I said softly to the screen. "Let's see what happens when I show up in full resolution." The email arrived just before noon. Subject line, "Join us for the launch of a new legacy." It was glossy, templated, unmistakably corporate. My name was there, but not where it should have been, not under speakers, not under stakeholders, not even under advisors. Just guessed, Rowena Mercer. There was no call, no briefing, no acknowledgement of my position on the board, just a line at the bottom. Dress code, black tie, cocktails at 6. As if that was enough. I stared at it for a moment, then hit accept. I wasn't planning to make noise, but the silence was starting to itch. That Friday evening, I arrived at the rooftop of the Eastwell Hotel in downtown Phoenix. The setting sun glazed the skyline in copper, while soft jazz played under string lights. Waiters in black vests moved like choreography. Every corner buzzed with someone important. Press badges, investors. Familiar faces I hadn't seen since the original founding days, some of whom had only ever known me as Callista's younger sister. A hostess waved me toward a reserved table. I followed, heels tapping across imported stone. Just as I set down my clutch, a new arrival at the entrance stole the crowd's attention. Callista. Of course. Glowing in a satin ivory gown, makeup flawless, confidence radiating like it was custom-made. But it wasn't just her. She was walking in with Reed, my ex. He wore a tailored navy suit, hairstyled just the way I remembered when things were still good between us. He had his hand at the small of her back, guiding her like he'd done with me 100 times before. Callista beamed, raising a glass. Everyone, meet our new brand strategy consultant, Reed Mercer. No one flinched, except me. I didn't react. I didn't blink. I took a sip of champagne like I was tasting air. Reed didn't look my way, once not even when he took the mic 20 minutes later, and launched into a talk on narrative pivoting in legacy branding. He used lines I recognized, things I had told him during long talks on my couch, over takeout, when we thought we were building something that mattered. It's not just about message, he said. It's about who gets to write the story. And just like that, he'd taken mine. After the applause, I walked to the balcony for a moment alone. That's where I ran into Julia, a financial reporter I'd known for years. We chatted briefly surface talk, industry chatter, until she tilted her head and asked, "So, big move with Eastline Ventures, huh?" I frowned. "What move?" "You're kidding. They closed on 22% equity last week. 8-figure deal. It's everywhere." My stomach dropped. I pulled out my phone and searched. There it was, Callista's face front and center in the Business Herald, under a headline that read, "Bold and solo-driven, how one woman is reinventing power." No mention of oversight, no board quote, nothing. My name had been left out of the company's largest transaction since its founding. I walked back inside like I wasn't falling apart. Callista stood near the stage, sipping a martini, surrounded by a halo of admirers. I approached slowly. She turned, all smooth composure. "Enjoying yourself?" I smiled without meaning it. "You've made this a game," I said, voice calm. "I just want to remind you, I wrote the rules." She leaned in, unfazed. "Then rewrite them. Let's see if anyone's still reading." I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I walked away. Later that night, back home, I changed out of the dress with methodical care. I opened the fireproof safe in my closet and retrieved the second folder, the one marked Trigger Conditions. Inside, clauses, legal pre-approvals, internal communications, all quietly prepared in case Callista ever pushed too far. I'd hoped I wouldn't need them. Now I knew better. The email I sent that morning was worded with precision brief, composed, impossible to misinterpret. I'd copied the board, legal counsel, and the COO. No emotion, just facts. I asked for clarity around the Eastline stake sale, noting politely that I had not been briefed, consulted, or included. I ended with one line. Transparency is a shared value unless it isn't. I dressed like I wasn't attending a board update, but something closer to a deposition. Dark suit, no jewelry, hair back. My presence had always been quiet, but today I needed them to remember I existed in black and white in ink and capital. The boardroom was already half full when I arrived. Callista glanced up from her phone just long enough to register me with that flat, closed-lip smile she used when she wanted people to think she wasn't bothered. I sat without a word. 15 minutes in, during a presentation from HR about team restructuring, someone handed out the updated internal org chart. It was meant to be routine, just a refresher. Until I saw my name. Operational support, non-core advisory. I stared at it, then raised my hand. Can someone explain this categorization? The assistant froze. It's just a formatting simplification, nothing formal. I believe those titles were placeholder groupings. I looked directly at Callista. I wired $1.2 million into this company when the bank wouldn't return your calls. Are you saying I supported this business like a barista cart? She didn't blink. We had to simplify the chart. Titles get cluttered. Cluttered. I didn't respond. I folded the paper, slid it into my folder, and smiled slightly as I tucked it away. I didn't need to yell. The damage had already been done, and this time I wasn't cleaning it up for them. That evening, I drove to my mother's house alone. It was quiet, just her and the warm hum of the stovetop. She offered me tea like it was any other Wednesday. I took it, sat down, and asked her straight. Do you remember telling me, after Dad passed, that you'd transfer your shares to me when the time was right? She hesitated, stirred her cup. I don't recall making that kind of promise, honey. You said it clearly. We were standing in the garden. You said you wanted me to have some say in this family future. She gave me that smile, the kind that tries to smooth over cracks without filling them. Maybe you misheard. Or maybe that was just something I was considering at the time. You know how memory works. I nodded slowly. Yeah, convenient amnesia. Her face tightened, but she said nothing more. I didn't argue. I just stood, thanked her for the tea, and left. Back at my place, I opened my laptop, heart steady, breath even. I drafted a new email. Effective immediately, all oversight and participation from my end will proceed solely through legal counsel. I will not attend non-binding meetings. I will not approve informal decisions. I will no longer act as a silent partner, in name or in function. I copied everyone. At the bottom, I wrote, "Consider this a formal boundary." The next morning, I was locked out of the company's Slack channel. My email inbox pinged 5 times in 10 minutes press alerts. I clicked the first one. Company Pioneer steps back amid restructuring. I read the headline twice, then closed the screen. Fine, I said aloud to the quiet room. Then let's restructure everything. The invitation arrived in a sleek ivory envelope, sealed with gold foil and pretension. Thick cardstock, embossed edges. Every word screamed luxury, legacy, reinvention, but not mine. It was a gala launch for the new brand identity of the company I had helped build, from a trembling idea on a whiteboard to something people now toasted with champagne. I searched the print bold, italic, and fine. My name was nowhere. Not as a founder, not even as a contributor. I RSVP, yes, without a second thought. Not because I wanted to celebrate. That phase had ended months ago, maybe years. No, I said yes, because there's something even colder than being erased quietly. Watching it happen in front of you, dressed up as celebration. The ballroom gleamed with excess. Crystal chandeliers shimmered like upside-down constellations, throwing scattered halos onto branded photo walls. Every surface whispered money. Callista's face was everywhere: billboards, step and repeats, digital slideshows on loop. The caption read, "Rebuild with elegance. Scale with soul." My line. I stood near the back wall in a black silk suit. Not to blend in, to become a shadow by design. Silas joined me quietly, dressed like a ghost, at a wedding, subdued, observant. He didn't ask how I was. He knew. "Just watch," he said. As Callista emerged from the wings, a microphone in hand and a grin rehearsed within an inch of its life. She looked flawless, a sculpted figure of credibility. And yet all I could hear was the hollowness behind her words. "Tonight isn't about where we've been," she began, her voice rich and charismatic. "It's about where we're headed. Together." She thanked the PR firm, the branding consultants, her interior designer, even her yoga coach, but not the woman who once worked 70-hour weeks to keep this company from dissolving into debt. Then came the moment that snapped the air in half. And a special thanks, she smiled, to L. Ramsey, whose vision reshaped our strategic trajectory. Silas' jaw ticked. I could feel the heat rise in my chest. L. Ramsey? The junior consultant who barely knew the difference between positioning and brand pillars 6 months ago? She had copied my presentation, down to the margins. I had mentored her, cleaned up her decks, and walked her through client strategy step by step. She had once texted me, panicked 10 minutes before a client pitch. Now, Callista was crediting her with a breakthrough that belonged to me. The applause rang out. Cameras clicked. My face didn't flinch. But my fingers curled around my clutch until the leather strained. I left before dessert. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't need to. The next morning, I moved with purpose. Tea in one hand, laptop open before the steam settled. No rants, no social media posts. I wasn't looking to go viral. I was looking to go accurate. I pulled up my archive. Emails with timestamps, initial drafts, version histories, slide decks annotated in Read Me Red, strategy memos, one with L's. Thank you so much. I couldn't have done this without you signed at the bottom. I labeled a new folder, R1 Contribution Attribution. Then I opened a new email. Subject: Timeline Review. Urgent clarification requested. To Legal Advisory, Board Oversight, Dear Board Members, please find enclosed documentation reflecting contribution timelines, drafts, and strategic frameworks relevant to last quarter's rollout attributed publicly elsewhere. Happy to discuss in detail. Respectfully submitted in advance of the annual review. Warm regards, M. No caps lock, no dramatics, just gravity. That evening, I sat at my kitchen counter and updated my professional bio. I deleted the line that read, "To help build brands that matter." I typed instead, "To own what I create and protect it at all costs." I stared at those words, letting them sink in. They didn't feel angry. They felt earned. At exactly 7:46 p.m., my inbox pinged. From Executive Liaison Subject. Meeting confirmed. The board will convene Friday morning. Please submit all presentation materials 24 hours prior. I placed my mug down gently and exhaled. Not from anxiety, but clarity. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing for impact, was stepping into one. Showtime, I whispered. And this time, I wouldn't be behind the curtain. I woke up to a vibration that wouldn't stop. The screen on my phone was a waterfall of messages, group chats, old colleagues, even a couple of passive-aggressive emails from distant board members who never spoke unless they smelled drama. Someone had sent me a link. Behind the glam. The bitter sister trying to tear it down. I didn't even need to open it to know. But I did. The layout was designed to look amateurish, like someone venting on a blog. But the language was calculated, precise. It referred to a shadow figure with outdated influence and a relative who never quite found her footing after failure. There were references to early company struggles, exact phrasing from family dinners no one outside that room should have known. It dripped with malice, wrapped in fake humility. They didn't use my name. They didn't have to. I checked the site's metadata, the back-end info. It was registered anonymously, of course. But the contact email? A placeholder connected to Gwen, Callista's head of PR. The same Gwen who used to forward me press drafts for approval before I was quietly pushed off those threads. This wasn't sloppy, it was timed. 3 days before I was scheduled to present to the board with legally binding records. I set my phone down, not gently. The mug of tea it made had gone cold. I didn't bother reheating it. Instead, I pulled up the R1 folder again, added a new section, External Interference. I uploaded screenshots, article archives, and IP trace logs. Everything needed to be time-stamped, clean, indisputable. 15 minutes later, Silas knocked on my door. He didn't need to ask if I'd seen it. He had that same look he'd worn the day we buried my father, grim. Composed, tired of being surprised. "I know," I said before he spoke. He pulled out his tablet and handed it over. On the screen, a full breakdown of contributions, contracts, version control history from our shared Dropbox. My pitch. Her voice. The overlap was surgical. We're past emotion, he said. This is about record now. We spent the rest of the morning finalizing the presentation tight, minimal, lined with timestamps and polite footnotes that left no room for excuses. By afternoon, it was uploaded to the board's internal portal, labeled Clarification, Strategic Attribution. The meeting took place the next day behind glass doors, under the drone of a ceiling vent and the cold watch of legal advisors. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look to anyone for reassurance. I opened with a short video Callista's TEDx talk, the one where she said, "Vision isn't about seeing the future sits, about remembering who helped build it." Then I laid over the original pitch deck, slide by slide, the wording, the formatting, the timeline. I turned to face them. "You have 3 choices," I said. 1. Update records to acknowledge joint strategy ownership. 2. Adjust equity. 3. Arbitration. Callista wasn't there. Her legal rep sat in her place, arms crossed. "I'm not here for revenge," I added. "I'm here for correction." I closed the laptop. No one spoke for a full 30 seconds. And when they did, it was procedural. "Thank you for your time. We'll be in touch." I walked out into the hallway and felt the sunlight warm my shoulders through the windows. My breath shook, but not from nerves. From power. That night, just past 10 p.m., a new article went live. Whispers of a silent takeover? I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I just turned my phone screen down and got back to work. The Desert Sky Convention Center glittered under November floodlights, as if the stars themselves had come down to watch. Outside, the desert air was brisk but dry. Inside, it was all glass and gold and curated perfection. I moved through the main corridor alone, unnoticed, just another shimmer in a sea of sequins and tailored suits. But not for long. Tonight was the company's annual gala. Once, it was a modest year-end affair. Now, thanks to Callista, it had bloomed into a full-blown spectacle tribute to a decade of visionary leadership. Her decade, her brand, her name on every banner, not a word about mine. I approached the 5th row, left side. My place card was printed in soft gold script. Guest +1. An afterthought, like I was someone's date, not someone who'd once co-authored the blueprint they were all drinking champagne over. I didn't bring anyone. Didn't need backup. What I carried tonight couldn't be held in a hand. Just as I sat down, my phone vibrated in my clutch. "Silas, you're ready." Let them talk first. The lights dimmed before I could text back. On screen, a slow-motion montage began to play Callista's most photogenic moments. Ribbon cuttings, charity auctions, tech talks. Her voice layered over the footage like gospel. She spoke about grit, growth, resilience. A chorus swelled under her narration, cueing polite awe. Then came the voiceover. One woman, one brand, one legacy. The applause was instant, practiced, paid for. She stepped on stage wearing a satin gown that shimmered like a lie. The crowd adored her. Investors, influencers, industry names, everyone who had a stake in pretending this empire was hers alone. She raised her glass. "To 10 years," she declared, smiling, "of fearlessness." I stood up. No spotlight followed. Just an uncertain rustle across the room as people craned their necks. I walked the center aisle slowly, my heels sharp against the marble floor, the hush growing louder with every step. Someone near the stage whispered my name. The MC flinched when I reached the steps, but Silas, already standing near the side curtain, gave him a tiny shake of the head. Daunt. No introduction, no preamble. I reached the podium, placed a single leather-bound folder down, opened it with care, as if the pages inside were sacred, which, in a way, they were. I looked out at them board members, stakeholders, people who once dismissed me as too quiet to lead. I cleared my throat once and spoke. 2 years ago, this company was 72 hours from default. The acquisition deal you're all familiar with? That wasn't magic. That was me. I refinanced the debt. I secured the contracts, and I acquired a controlling interest. I paused. I own 51% of this company. Silence collapsed over the room like a dropped curtain. In the back, a champagne flute shattered. Someone whispered a curse. Up front, a PR assistant gripped Callista's arm so tightly, her knuckles whitened. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. I stepped away from the mic. The contract complete, with notarization and legal seals, remained on the podium. I didn't wait for questions. There would be plenty tomorrow. Outside, the cold hit me in the best way. Real. Honest. Like something earned. I walked across the tiled plaza, alone, each step quieter than the last. With every click of my heels, I felt its hame peeling off, silence crumbling. The version of me they tried to reduce to a footnote was gone. I reached my car, slid into the seat and shut the door. For a moment, I just stared at the wheel. My hands rested on the leather, steady now. My reflection blinked back at me from the rearview mirror. Tired? Yes, but whole. I didn't win tonight, I said aloud, my voice even. I just took my name back. My phone buzzed again. Silas. Board wants to meet. They're calling you first thing. I nodded to no one. Started the engine. The dash glowed faintly, as if it too was waking up. Let's finish it. The morning light bled in slow through the sheer curtains, casting long golden stripes across the living room floor. It was the kind of sunlight that asked for nothing, offering no judgment, no noise, no urgency, just presence. For once, I welcomed the silence. There were no frantic calls, no new depositions waiting in red folders, no breaking news alerts pinging across my phone. Just one quiet email, its subject line blinking back at me like a soft exhale. Subject: Confirmation of executive authority pending board ratification. That was it. No exclamation marks, no dramatic headings. But it held more weight than any press release or public apology ever could. It meant I wasn't a footnote anymore. I hadn't just fought to be heard. I had made it impossible to be ignored. Not because I screamed, but because I stood long enough for the room to finally go quiet. The media didn't know what to do with that kind of ending. Most headlines called it a quiet restructuring, a strategic leadership transition. A few hinted at deeper shifts beneath the surface. None dared call it what it truly was, a reckoning in plain clothes. Callista released a statement later that afternoon. It was polished, vaguely introspective, and thoroughly impersonal, stepping away for personal clarity, she said. The words sounded like a retreat wrapped in dignity. I knew it for what it was. So did the board. And deep down, so did she. That evening, just as dusk began to soak the sky in lavender and navy, I heard a soft knock on my front door. I hadn't been expecting anyone, and yet I wasn't surprised. I opened the door to find Irene, my mother. Her hands were empty. No gifts, no olive branches. She looked older than I remembered. Not in years, but in softness, like the sharp lines had faded into shadows. She didn't ask if she could come in. She just stepped inside like she still owned a key, like the house hadn't changed just because the daughter had. We didn't speak of the contracts she once hid from me, or of Callista's glaring absence from the last board meeting, or the fact that, for the first time, my photo and full title now appeared on the company's website, no longer buried under the vague label Other Contributors. Instead, she walked to the bookshelf, where gaps had been left like missing teeth, and slid a small frame into its old home. It was a picture of me college graduation day, smiling in the heat, eyes squinting at a future I hadn't known would cost me so much. It was the photo she claimed had been lost in the move. I never believed her. I didn't believe her now either. But I also didn't ask. Some truths are so small, they don't need to be spoken, they just need to be returned quietly to where they belong. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery. The wind that met me was brisk, dry, and strangely soothing. It wove through rows of gravestones and plastic bouquets, tugging at the edges of my coat like a child needing attention. I walked slowly to my father's headstone, the folder in my hands more worn than before, creased and frayed from every meeting, every courtroom, every moment I'd used it to shield myself from forgetting what they did. I stood still, letting the silence wrap around me. I remembered that moment at the gala, just after my speech, the nod from him. Barely perceptible. A blink might be missed it. But I hadn't. He had seen me. Even then. Later that night, back home, I plugged an old hard drive into my laptop. It whirred to life like a ghost waking up. I sifted through folders buried under layers of time until I stumbled on the one I hadn't dared open. Voicemails, dozens of them, archived, unheard, forgotten. One stood out. I didn't know why. His voice came through, rough with age, words breaking around static and breath. If they don't thank you in time, don't wait. The truth has its own clock, and you're the reason this family still stands. I didn't cry because I was sad. It was something deeper than sadness, like surrender, like finally setting down a burden I'd carried so long, I forgot what it felt like to be light. When I returned to the present, I opened a new document and typed my final note to the board. I declined the CEO role, not because I wasn't ready, but because I didn't need it. I didn't want ceremony. I didn't crave spotlight. I accepted the title of Chair of Oversight instead. A quieter position, but one that carried real influence. Silent power was still power. In my journal that night, I wrote just one line. Let them keep the spotlight. I'll hold the foundation. Around midnight, I walked the long way home, past the family estate. The windows glowed the soft yellow of memory. Through the front kitchen window, I saw Callista seated alone at the table, arms crossed, chin resting on her wrist, gazing at something I couldn't see. Maybe a letter, maybe nothing at all. Maybe she finally realized there were no more moves to play. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't pause for some final tearful hug or nostalgic farewell. I kept walking. Lighter, not whole, but no longer carrying their silence as my burden. Just mine. And that was enough. Sometimes what breaks us isn't a moment, it's the slow accumulation of being overlooked, of showing up and never being counted. But here's what I've learned. Silence, when chosen wisely, is not weakness. It's strategy. And owning your truth, even when no one applauds, is still victory. If you're someone who's been underestimated, ignored, or written out, don't spend your life asking for a seat. Build your own table. They may not clap for you, clap for yourself. You don't need everyone to believe in your worth, just you. And maybe one quiet nod from someone who knew all along. What about you? Have you ever felt erased in your own story? Have you ever had to stand up without backup and rewrite the ending yourself? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something in you, or tell me where you're watching from. And if this wasn't your cup of tea, tell me why your voice matters here too. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel just a little less alone, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. We've got more stories like this, stories that dig deep, peel back layers, and maybe help someone else feel seen. Thank you for listening. Your story matters too. Hi, I'm Brielle, and my sister called me a poor cleaner inside the showroom I built from the ground up. She stood there, in front of clients and cameras, laughing like my sweat had been a phase. But what hurt more than her words was how everyone else stayed quiet. They clapped for her. They handed her credit for my name, my work, my legacy. But I wasn't just erased, I was replaced. What would you do if your own family rewrote your story while smiling in your face? Would you walk away, or would you make them remember exactly who you are? Let me tell you what I did. The morning sunlight cut across the marble floor like a spotlight on a stage I no longer recognized. My name was on the building, engraved in brushed gold above the entrance, but inside, I had become invisible. It was supposed to be a soft launch, quiet, controlled. Just a few industry people, returning clients, and press. I stood by the welcome desk, where it once greeted every customer myself, with a fresh espresso in hand and a practiced smile. I didn't expect flowers or applause, just acknowledgement. And then she arrived. Valora swept through the glass doors like she was walking a runway. Designer heels, hair curled to perfection, and that air she always carried, the kind that made people lean in, even if they didn't know why. She hugged the manager, laughed with the valet, and nodded at clients who didn't even know her name a month ago. They know it now, though. She made sure of that. She walked right past me. No pause, no glance. No "Hey sis, good job." Just air. Then, to a man browsing the latest model, she said with a breezy chuckle, "I used to help her clean houses. Now she's here too. Funny how life works, right?" He laughed. I didn't. I felt the heat climb up the back of my neck, but I didn't move. Even the staff, people I had hired and trained, looked away like they weren't sure what to do. I'd become a footnote in my own showroom. I stepped aside, letting the espresso cool in my hand. My feet knew their way to the office, even though I wasn't ready to sit. Just needed a minute. The air felt thinner in there. Kellen found her next. The showroom manager charming, loyal to her. They'd known each other since Valora hosted pop-up shows in Brentwood. He handed her a glass of champagne and smiled like she was royalty. "She's the face of the brand," he told a small group of press huddled near the display. I wasn't 2 feet away. No one corrected him. A young intern, barely 20, fresh out of some marketing program, handed me a trifold brochure and said, "You can help with client parking today, right?" My lips parted, but I closed them just as fast. I nodded once. She walked off without a second glance. This wasn't confusion. It was intentional. The clients were handed flutes of champagne, personalized printouts, keys to preview models. I was offered silence. I excused myself. Outside, the noise softened. Santa Monica traffic hummed in the distance. I walked down the street, shoes clicking against pavement I'd walked for years. The same pavement I'd driven up and down, looking for the perfect building. The same sidewalk I'd paced when the first bank denied my loan. The same curb I'd sat on, knees up, when I signed my first lease and called it a win. I turned to look at the showroom. The glass walls shimmered. Behind them, my sister's laugh bounced between steel and leather. My staff nodded at her every word. I saw my name called well in metallic gold letters. She never changed it, just buried it. I thought of my first customer, the one who drove in because he'd taken the time to answer his questions online when no one else would. I remembered painting the baseboards myself because the contractor flaked. I remembered begging the city to fast-track my license application. I remembered all of it. I was never trying to be famous, just honest, just worthy. When I stepped back inside, I didn't cause a scene. I didn't cry. I walked straight to the reception counter, smiled at a client, and offered her espresso. She smiled back, almost startled by my warmth. Then Valora caught my eye across the room. Her stare wasn't curious or kind. It was sharp, territorial, like it touched something that didn't belong to me. But it did. All of it. I turned away from her. I needed a plan, not a confrontation. This wasn't the moment. But I would have one. That evening, I sat at my desk in the office. The room was dim, blinds half drawn, the sound of distant traffic crawling through the windows. I opened a blank document on my laptop, and I typed the first line. Not out of anger, not even out of pain, but clarity. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted a letter that made silence into a sound they couldn't ignore. The words were clinical, calculated, and legally binding. This time, I wasn't playing defense. I emailed the document to myself, closed the laptop, and stared at the slow swirl in my coffee cup. I didn't sleep that night. Not from anger, but because something inside me had shifted subtly, like a floorboard finally giving under years of weight. Saturday started quietly. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, but cautions. I made coffee in my condo kitchen and leaned on the counter while scrolling through my phone. Notifications fluttered in like confetti likes, tags, reposts. Her face, again. My showroom, again. Valora had posted a slick video reel of herself twirling in front of the showroom windows. She'd tagged her brand in bold white font and captioned it, "My space, my aesthetic, my story. I watched the video twice, not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. She used the tagline I created 3 years ago, built from grit, shaped by grace. The same words I wrote in a journal at 2 a.m., with tears smudging the ink. She delivered it with a smirk, camera zooming in as if she were the architect of all of it. I didn't comment. I didn't call. I screen recorded the video, bookmarked the post, and saved the audio. I knew what I was doing. She didn't just take the room, I whispered aloud, the words strange in my empty kitchen. She took my words too. By late morning, I was on a call with Devonthi freelance designer who'd helped me with my original branding. He hadn't changed. Still polite, still slightly too eager. Hey, Brielle. I've been meaning to check in. Saw some of the new stuff going out. Looks like things are booming. I paused. Devon, have you sent any of our old files to Valora? Silence. Then a cough. She asked for the editable logo files last month. Said it was a family collaboration, that you were both rebranding together. Seku thought it was all above board. Did she use my original deck? I asked, calm. Just parts of it, he muttered. The intro slides, the aesthetic palette. Honestly, I didn't think twice. No worries, I replied. Thanks for confirming. I hung up and sat in my chair without moving. My fingers tapped the edge of the table without rhythm. I wasn't surprised. I was tired of being surprised. By late afternoon, I was driving downtown. The traffic was sluggish, the air thick. I parked 2 blocks from the building and walked the rest of the way. The trademark office was sterile and quattro after row of computers. Beige walls. The faint click of keyboards. Thomas had helped me file our original name rights when I opened. I pulled up the database and typed in Caldwell Concept. The first result wasn't mine. A limited-use trademark request had been submitted under Valoris LLC filed 2 weeks ago. She had included photos of the showroom, brand pitch decks, color scheme references. It was my work, only with her name attached. I printed the screen and slid it into my folder. The sun was setting when I got back to my car. The streetlights flickered on as I buckled my seatbelt. I didn't drive immediately. I sat there, hands on the wheel, eyes on the red lights ahead. It wasn't about the logo. It wasn't about the caption, the video, the champagne, or the laughs. It was about my name, my risk, my rebuild, and how easily someone could steal it just by saying, "We're family." It used to sting. Now it just made things clear. That night, I opened my phone one more time and reread her caption. Every inch of this showroom reflects my journey. I felt something in me break. That night, I reread the caption she wrote. She said, "Every inch of this showroom reflects my journey." I felt something in me break. And when something breaks quietly, you don't scream, you sharpen. Sunday came with overcast skies, and just enough wind to lift the edges of my coat as I walked up the steps to the community center. The event was a brunch for local businesswomen, something it helped fund years ago, before it had a sponsor, before it had glossy brochures. Now it had a banner with Valoris' name printed in cursive at the top and a crowd sipping mimosas like they were at a fashion show. I stood near the back, nursing weak coffee from a paper cup, not expecting much. I should have known better. The projector screen lit up with a slideshow of the showroomy showroom, the one I leased, painted, and opened with my first business loan. The one where I used to sleep in the back office during late-night audits. Valora took the mic and gave a little laugh, the kind that made the room lean in. "I always tell people," she started, "success comes from the strangest places. My sister and I used to clean cars together. She wore this big red apron, we called her Cherry. The room erupted. My throat didn't tighten, my eyes didn't sting, but something inside me slid sideways. They laughed because it sounded like a cute memory, something lighthearted, something shared. But that apron wasn't a punchline. It was survival. I bought it for $6.99 from a clearance rack at a hardware store. I wore it every evening after school when I scrubbed wheels for tips and wiped down dashboards in the winter cold. While Valora was at mixers and rooftop parties, I was kneeling in oil stains, my hands raw, my back sore. She never cleaned cars. She never touched the hose. I left without finishing my coffee. No one noticed. They were too busy clapping. Outside, the wind had picked up. I kept walking until the noise behind me disappeared into the street. Across from a closed bookstore, I sat on a weather-worn bench and stared at the sidewalk like it might explain something. The red apron, the janitor's closet where I used to change clothes before night shifts, the smell of bleach mixed with cheap citrus cleaner that stuck to my skin. The calluses on my palms I used to file down with sandpaper because I couldn't afford gloves. I'd buried all of it. Not out of shame, but out of strategy. Because when you grow up in a family where attention is currency, you learn early. Stay small, stay quiet, stay out of the spotlight unless you can guarantee applause. Valora had taken my quiet and turned it into a costume. You don't forget a red apron when it was all you had to protect your dignity, I murmured to no one. It wasn't just the lie. It was the ownership of my history, repackaged as a laugh line. I sat there for a long time, letting the truth settle, not the truth of what happened, but the truth of what it meant. She didn't just rewrite the story. She told it in front of a crowd that had no idea they were clapping for the wrong girl. That night, I stayed home. I didn't answer emails or calls. I opened an old storage bin in the hall closet and pulled out a file box. Inside, receipts, photos, handwritten schedules, grant rejection letters, and client thank you cards. I started laying them out on my kitchen island, one memory at a time, one proof point after another. Then, I grabbed a blank notebook and began drafting a timeline. Each entry had a date and a fact. No emotion, just markers of effort, of ownership. I pinned a photo of the red apron to the corkboard above my desk. It wasn't pristine. It had a bleach spot near the pocket and fraying along the hem, but it was real. Mine. I didn't feel broken, I felt awake, and I wasn't letting her write me out anymore. I wasn't erased, I was overwritten. And that's easier to expose. Sometimes a sister doesn't need to raise her voice, just raise a file folder. It was one of those Mondays where the air already felt brittle by noon, tense and sharp, like it was holding its breath. I had just poured myself a second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed with Lorraine's name. I didn't pick up, not immediately. I watched the screen until the last vibration died out. It wasn't about playing games, it was about control. I wanted to decide the tone of this conversation on my terms, not hers. When I finally returned her call, I was calm, detached. She, on the other hand, sounded warm. Overly warm. Like someone trying to wrap poison in a velvet ribbon. "Brielle," she said, "can we meet for coffee? Just us." No pressure. It's been a while. There was pressure. The kind you feel in your chest when someone says no pressure. We met near the marina at a cafe that smelled like rosemary and entitlement. Lorraine was already there, seated at a corner table. Her blazer looked expensive but not loud, the kind of neutral beige that screams money only to people trained to notice it. She stood as I approached, arms opening just slightly. "You look well, Brielle." "You too," I replied, settling into the seat across from her. We skipped small talk. No weather, no mention of holidays or how fast the year was flying. Lorraine was always surgical with her words when she had a mission, and today was no different. "I've been watching things unfold," she began. "The business, the buzz. Valoris really come into her own." There it was. The thesis statement. "She connects with people," she continued, smoothing her napkin. "Media, clients. She brings something magnetic to the room. That's a rare trait." I smiled faintly. "Has she?" Lorraine leaned forward, eyes soft but sharp. "You've built something incredible truly. But sometimes, it's wise to let the one who shines shine. People remember the face, not the blueprint." I stirred my coffee, letting the silence expand just long enough to shift the energy. "So what are you saying, Lorraine? That I become the ghost in my own legacy?" Her tone stayed sweet, but her delivery was clean. "Of course not. I am saying maybe take a quieter role. Behind the scenes, Brand identity can suffer when it's split. I blinked slowly. Did Valora say that? Or did she just let you say it for her? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. This isn't about sides, Brielle. No? I raised an eyebrow. Then why does it feel like I'm being politely removed from my own table? She took a careful sip of her coffee and delivered the line I knew was coming. Some people build, some people shine. Valora shines. Let her. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I stood, smoothed out my jacket, and slid my chair back under the table. Thanks for the coffee. Outside, the wind off the water slapped my face, and I welcomed it. It wasn't refreshing, it was clarifying. Like the kind of cold that made you remember things, made you remember who you were before the world asked you to shrink. At home, I climbed up to the top shelf of my closet and pulled down a storage box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were folders and binders, some of them warped from age, others still stiff like they'd been waiting. I dragged everything to the dining room table and spread them out like a case file. Contracts, handwritten notes, concept sketches, presentation decks, articles, my name in footnotes, in credits, on filing slips and headers. Valora's name didn't start showing up until much later, and even then, only in the glossy parts. The launch parties, the interviews, the magazine spreads, the curated side of a story already written. I worked through the night, creating a timeline. I highlighted discrepancies, dated everything. I didn't rush. I wanted it to be airtight. Not for vengeance, but for clarity. Because truth, once silenced, has to be louder when it returns. When I finally sat back, I opened a blank Word document. At the top, I typed, "If she insists on erasing me, I'll show them who built the ink she writes with." Then I sat there, letting the weight of that sentence settle into the room. I had always avoided confrontation. I was the quiet sister, the steady one, but erasure isn't silence, it's theft. And I had learned to document everything, not for applause, but for moments like this. Moments when your absence becomes your proof. Sometimes, people mistake the quiet ones for the forgettable ones. But it's the quiet ones who write everything down, who build the scaffolding and hand you the keys until one day, they quietly change the locks. I hadn't raised my voice. I didn't need to, because sometimes a sister doesn't need to shout. She just needs to raise a folder and let the truth speak for itself. I never liked confrontations, but theft of truth is a war I've trained for without knowing. The showroom sparkled under carefully arranged spotlights, every panel of glass polished to reflect a success story that had been rewritten. Thursday night's launch event was meant to debut the new luxury model, but it might as well have been a coronation. I arrived early, not to impress, but to prepare. I wasn't on the printed schedule, but I knew my name would still carry weight if only in the silence of a mission. Inside, the mood buzzed. PR girls fluttered between displays. Guests posed beside vehicles like they owned them. Local news crews hovered near the back, setting up tripods and testing sound bites. I checked in, gave a polite nod to Kellen, who barely returned it. The young intern who once handed me brochures now wore a headset and clip-on badge like she was running the show. I didn't see Veloriot. My reserved seat was marked. Row 2, far right, second row. I took it without protest. The first row had white orchids. Mine had shadows. Moments later, she appeared. In cream silk, with a custom nameplate pin resting just below her collarbone, Valora Gray, chief visionary. She waved to the cameras like royalty, her smile already choreographed. As the music faded, the MC took the stage. "Tonight," he began, "we honor not just innovation, but legacy. The Caldwell story isn't just about cars, it's about family, about reinvention, about the boldness to dream differently." He gestured toward Valora. And none of that would be possible without the guiding light behind this brand's evolution. Please welcome the woman reshaping luxury itself, Valora Gray. Applause erupted. I clapped with them, just slow enough to be unreadable. She took the microphone like it belonged to her hand. "I remember the early days," she said. "Late nights, ideas scribbled on napkins, chasing a vision nobody else saw. My father always told us, if you can find the right path, build it. So I did. And I've had help along the way, from people who saw in me what I was still discovering. She named Lorraine. She quoted our father. She did not say my name. The omission wasn't subtle, it was precise. I sat there, composed, while the crowd rose to their feet. A woman behind me whispered, "Isn't that her sister sitting there?" Another voice, "You'd think she'd be on stage." I turned slightly and smiled. Not yet. The program wrapped. Champagne glasses clinked. People lined up to take selfies with Valora in front of the display model. I wandered toward the far end of the showroom, away from the noise. That's when I heard her voice again. This time, from the main office. She was live streaming. Through the glass wall, I saw her phone propped against a branded stand. Behind her, the showroom looked like a magazine spread. And this space, she was saying, this space reflects my journey. Every inch tells a story, me story. I stepped into the doorway, just out of frame. The team here, she continued, they're not just co-workers, they're family. That's when I said it. Family doesn't forget who built the foundation. She froze. Not visibly, just enough that the curve of her sentence slipped. Her eyes flicked toward the doorway. The live stream comments slowed, then erupted with question marks and emojis. Someone off camera whispered, "Cut it." Valora pressed her screen, and the feed ended mid-frame. For a few seconds, no one spoke. She didn't say anything to me. I didn't need her to. The audience she cared about most had already heard what mattered. Valora's smile dropped first. Then the viewers started asking questions she couldn't answer. Some people fear confrontation. I fear becoming invisible more. The morning after Valora's livestream stunt, I sat in my home office with a cup of strong coffee and a file open on my desktop. The recording wasn't new. I'd had it saved for over a year, buried under folders marked legal and brand use. But I hadn't listened to it in a long time. I clicked play. She's good at scrubbing floors and staying out of the way. Let her do that. Her voice poured through the speakers like acid in slow motion. It was a recording from a call she hadn't known was being monitored back when she was trying to push me out of a supplier contract and thought she was talking to a friendly middleman. I didn't flinch. I just paused the file, labeled it with the date and timestamp, and saved it under a new folder. If needed. I texted Thomas. He was more than a lawyer. He was my friend, and the only one who never once acted like I was paranoid. I sent him the audio. A few minutes later, he called. "This isn't the kind of thing you toss out casually," he said. "You sit on it. Let her keep digging. When she's waist deep, you drop it." I closed my laptop. Understood. By late afternoon, I was driving toward Lorraine's house with a thank you basket I didn't want to give. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to, but I kept my face neutral. The house looked the same, white trim, manicured hedges, too many wind chimes. She greeted me like always, with a hug that never quite closed the gap between us. "You didn't have to," she said, motioning to the basket. "I know," I smiled. "But I wanted to." We sat in the sunroom. She talked about a foundation gala she and Valora had attended last weekend. I nodded when appropriate, responded when needed, waited for her to excuse herself for a phone call, which she did, like clockwork. As soon as she stepped into the kitchen, I walked down the hallway to the office. I knew she kept the safe in the same place tucked, behind a sliding panel in the bookcase, half hidden behind old property deeds. I pulled the panel, crouched down, and entered my father's birthday. The click was almost insulting in its ease. Inside was exactly what I suspected. The original, signed Wilmy, father's own handwriting, notarized, stamped, dated. The showroom was mine. Not shared, not partial, not pending. Mine. I photographed every page with my phone. I didn't touch anything else. When I closed the safe, I locked it with the same precision I'd used to open it. By the time Lorraine returned, I was already complimenting her on the new hydrangeas outside the window. That night, Valora called. No text warning, just the screen lighting up with her name. I let it ring once before answering. She didn't waste time. We need to talk. So talk. Her tone shifted. About the live stream. It was nothing, a PR thing. Spontaneous. You had a branded stand for your phone, I replied. That's not spontaneous. Silence. I'm not trying to erase you, she said. You're just not as visible. I bring a different audience. I let her talk. It was always easier that way. Let them fill the air until their own words incriminate them. Then I spoke. If you continue using my name, my story, or that showroom like you built it, it'll release two things. A recording and a will. Neither one flatters you. She exhaled sharply. You wouldn't. I didn't say I would, I replied. I said I haven't. Yet. Another pause. This one longer. You're threatening me now? She said. I am informing you. Call it what you want. I ended the call without waiting for a response. Then I sat back in the chair and let my breath settle. For once I didn't feel hollow. I felt certain. But she didn't retreat. She doubled down. That's when this stopped being personal and became war. Valoris' idea of war wasn't subtle. It was public, performative, and meant to humiliate. Saturday night, I walked into the ballroom of the Ashton Hotel, having RSVP to a last-minute invitation from an unnamed donor. It was a charity dinner at least on the surface. Velvet ropes, champagne trays, carefully dressed silence. The kind of event where people pretend they aren't watching each other, even though every eye scans every label, every hand placement, every whisper. I had no idea Valora would be there. Correction, I had no idea it was her event. Until Dean stepped on stage. Dean. My ex. He hadn't changed much. Maybe a little grayer at the temples. Maybe his suits fit better. But the eyes? Still calculating. He spoke about the importance of local entrepreneurs, community trust, and then introduced the woman behind the creative heartbeat of our brand partnership. My wife, Valora Gray. Applause thundered. I stood rooted to the floor, unsure if I'd laugh or walk out. Valora emerged from backstage like she belonged to the lighting. Cream-colored gown, gold earrings, her hand resting casually on Dean's shoulder like she'd never had to fight for anything in her life. And then she said it, loud enough for the nearby table and the camera crew to hear. Funny how life works out, she smiled. I got the company. And the man. People laughed, some uncomfortably, some easily. I didn't. I found a seat near the back, away from the stage, and stayed through the dinner out of something that felt like dignity, but may have just been defiance. I listened to her speech flowery, empty, wrapped in false gratitude. After dessert, I stepped outside. The garden was lit with soft strings of lights, and the air had cooled just enough to remind me it was still real life. That's when I heard a small voice behind me. Are you Mommy's assistant? I turned. It was Tinsley, Valoris' daughter, 7, maybe 8, wearing a glittery headband and holding a half-melted cake pop. I'm sorry? I asked gently. She smiled, wide and innocent. Mommy said you used to clean for her. That's why you know everything about the showroom. I crouched to her level. Is that what she said? She nodded, pleased to be helpful. Thank you for telling me, I whispered. That's very kind. Then I stood, walked back into the ballroom, and found the nearest exit. By the time I got home, my skin felt like it had been peeled back layer by layer all evening, the kind of raw that doesn't bleed, it just burns. I poured a glass of water, set it down untouched, and went into my office. There, in a file box I hadn't opened in years, was a photograph. Faded, a little bent. Me and Dean. Before Valora. He had his arm around me, not possessively, but naturally. I looked happy. Naive. I remembered what he used to say when I worked late. You'll never be soft enough for family, Brielle. You're all edge and numbers. And Valora? She'd watched that crumble, then stepped into the life I'd been building without ever picking up a hammer. She didn't want her own story. She wanted mine, just without the weight. I walked to the whiteboard on my wall, picked up the marker, and wrote, my name, my father's trust, my business, my future. She's after all of it. I stared at the list until the letters blurred. I had one thing left that was undeniable: the truth. And it was time the world heard it, raw and uncut. If she wanted my life so badly, she could keep the fiction. I'd bring the facts. By Thursday afternoon, I was already at the showroom when it happened, and come in to meet with the finance team about quarterly reports, trying to keep my head down, keep the work moving. But fate doesn't wait for permission. A walk-in client, young, confident, holding her phone like it was a third hand, asked for a tour. Valora, of course, stepped forward with her signature rehearsed enthusiasm. "This space?" she said with her trademark smile. "Oh, it's mine. All of it." I shaped the experience top to bottom. You see, my sister used to mop floors. Now she pretends to run empires. The words sliced through the room like a blade. I was in the next room, just outside view, hearing every word. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, it was worse. It was casual. The kind that says, "We all understand who matters here." The client didn't say anything, but I saw her glance sideways, a slight frown forming. I didn't know at the time that she was live streaming. That video hit TikTok less than an hour later. Title: Luxury Lady Destroys Sister's Dignity at Her Own Showroom. By dinner time, it had crossed 1 million views. By morning, the comment sections were wildfires. "Wait, she said used to clean floors? She's the real owner? This feels like textbook erasure. Where's the sister? We want her side." I didn't post anything. I didn't need to. I spent that evening in my home office with Thomas. We pulled up weeks of security footage, clip by clip. In one video, Valora was introducing herself to a visiting investor as co-founder and head of creative. In another, she was accessing my private files from the main office desktop. Then there was the final Clifford whispering to Kellen, instructing him to remove my name from the presentation slides before sending them to a sponsor. Thomas packaged it all neatly on a USB and walked it into the offices of 3 different reporters he trusted. Not tabloids, legitimate business outlets, the kind that care about evidence and ethics. Then I wrote my statement. Friday morning came with overcast skies and a tension that felt like static in my teeth. I stood outside the showroom, a small podium set up by the front steps. Microphones blinked red with recording lights. Reporters stood at a polite distance, notebooks ready. I didn't wait for silence. I spoke like I was telling a room full of old friends the truth they already suspected. I built this place with my own hands, with every dollar I saved, with every late night spent arguing with banks and painters, with my father's trust and a belief that hard work was enough. I paused, scanning the small crowd. What was taken wasn't just a title or a spotlight. It was my name, my story. But I'm taking it back. I gestured to the portable screen behind me and hit play. The video was short, just enough. Valora's voice came through first, her laugh, her words, her erasure. The crowd didn't gasp, they shifted. You could feel the current change in their eyes. Valora's team issued a statement within the hour. She deeply regrets any misunderstandings. I didn't respond. The showroom stayed open that day. Business continued. But the air had changed. Clients looked at me differently. Staff offered eye contact. The silence that used to hum with dismissal now buzzed with recognition. But peace? No, not yet. The truth was out, but peace hadn't arrived. Some wounds still needed a reckoning. Just because you win doesn't mean you heal. Some things still echo in the silence. The showroom was still. Still in the way a space can only be after a storm has passed and taken the noise with it. 1 week had gone by since the press conference, and the silence felt earned. No reporters at the windows now, no anxious footsteps, no accidental flashes of a camera lens through the bouquets at the entrance. Just the gentle hum of the HVAC and the quiet, steady clicks of my heels as I crossed the polished tile floor. It was early Sunday morning, the kind of morning where the light filters in soft and slow, spilling through the tall windows like it, too, had decided to exhale. Then the front door chimed. I turned toward the sound, expecting a delivery or a client who'd mistaken the hours, but it was Marilla Boone, the same woman who had once stood at the back of the conference room, silently watching as I was interrupted, dismissed, and spoken over. Now she stepped through the door with deliberate grace, her burgundy beret angled just so, her coat buttoned to the collar. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried something deeper older than sympathy and gentler than pity. It was something like earned respect. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, her voice as even as ever. "Not at all," I said, already walking to meet her. She held out a small envelope. It wasn't thick or grand, just plain ivory paper, folded with care. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, "for reminding me that dignity still matters in this world. I'm not someone who knows much about business, but I do know when someone is being wronged. And I know what it looks like when someone decides not to let that be the end of the story." I didn't trust myself to speak right away. I took the envelope with a small nod, swallowing a lump that came quicker than expected. Her words weren't grand or rehearsed, but they hit me in a place that still felt bruised. She left soon after. No fanfare, no lingering. I didn't open the envelope until later. Inside, a short handwritten note in blue ink, cursive letters leaning gently to the right. It simply said, "Some people speak loudly, others speak clearly." I heard you. I sat with those words for a long time. She hadn't praised my win or my strategy. She'd seen me not for what had proven in court or in front of cameras, but for what I had chosen to carry with composure when it would have been easier to throw it all down. That afternoon, Thomas called. "It's done," he said without preamble. "The trademark is secure. The tax filings are in. Valoris LLC was dissolved last Friday." A beat of silence passed between us. "Media pressure did what courtrooms couldn't," he added. I leaned against the window frame, looking out at the street below. "She gave it up?" I asked. "Technically? Yes. Publicly? She's still spinning it." He forwarded me the press release. The headline read, "Valora Drayton announces graceful exit from company for sake of family unity." I read the statement aloud, tone flat. Sometimes letting go is the most powerful choice. A breath escaped me, half laugh, half disbelief. "She never knew what unity meant," I murmured. But I didn't need her apology. I didn't need headlines or retractions. What I needed, truly, was for the silence that followed to feel different. And that's what I got. That evening, after the final client's car pulled away and the showroom lights dimmed to their warm golden hue, I wandered the space alone. I walked past displays, each now arranged with intention. I passed the conference nook, the tall ficus in the corner, the samples arranged by tone and texture. All of it now felt like mine again, not because a court had ruled it, but because I had reclaimed it, piece by piece. Eventually, I reached the hallway near the back, the one clients rarely saw. It was where deliveries were signed for, where staff took coffee breaks and laughed in quiet corners. And there, behind a glass panel just above the coat hooks, was the red apron. Pressed, cleaned, framed. No title, no inscription. Just fabric worn and simple and memory. It hung it myself that morning, without ceremony. It wasn't there for clients to admire or to spark conversation. It wasn't even there for Valora. It was for me. I stared at it for a while, arms folded across my chest, the silence around me now a friend rather than a punishment. In that small frame, I saw everything I'd once been taught to hide. Effort, labor, roots. And now, pride. I used to think power looked like a microphone, that it had to be loud, public, sweeping. But now I know it can also look like something quietly permanent. Something you mount behind glass, not to forget, but to honor. A thought came then, unexpected and unplanned. Forgiveness isn't always a door you open. Sometimes, it's a door you lock so you can finally walk past it. Sometimes, surviving the storm isn't the story, it's what you do with the quiet afterward that matters. I didn't fight for revenge. I fought for recognition. Not to be applauded, but to be seen. If this journey taught me anything, it's that silence can be power, but only if you know when to hold it and when to break it. To those of you watching, maybe you've had your name taken out of something you built. Maybe your story was retold without your consent. Maybe, like me, you've sat in a room full of people clapping for someone else and wondered if it was worth speaking up. Let me tell you, it is. You don't need to shout to be heard. But when you do speak, make sure it's with clarity, not anger. With truth, not noise. Stand your ground not to win a spotlight, but to reclaim your foundation. What about you? Have you ever felt erased in your own life, at work, in your family, or in your community? What did you do about it? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. If this video resonated with you, type 1 in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't, tell me why. I value every perspective. If you want to hear more stories that hit close to the heart and honor the quiet strength inside us all, don't forget to subscribe. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. And I'm here to tell more stories just like this one. Hi, Embryona. My parents once told me I wasn't CEO material. They said it like they were handing me a napkin, not cutting me out of a legacy. But I didn't expect the sign outside the company or family company to lose my name overnight. Or the boardroom seat I earned, handed to my brother-in-law while I still handled payroll. They erased me from the will, then from the website, then from the photo on the wall. But when my 8-year-old niece asked if Uncle Orion was the boss now because he was just better, I realized this was just about business. It was a quiet execution, and I stayed silent until the day I didn't. What would you do if your own family rewrote your story without telling you? You can usually feel a room before you understand it. That day, I felt the shift the second I stepped into the boardroom. It wasn't just quiet, it was rehearsed. A silence that had been passed around and perfected, like an inside joke I wasn't part of. Elgin was already at the head of the table, his posture too relaxed, his gaze too neutral. His coffee black, no sugar still steamed in front of him. Fresh. He'd been here a while, long enough to settle, not long enough to drink. Across from him sat Isolde, expression unreadable, her pen poised as if she were about to sign a ceasefire agreement. Others lined the table, shuffling papers, murmuring pleasantries, pretending to review the agenda. But no one looked up. Not at me. Then I saw it. My nameplate, the brushed steel rectangle that had anchored my seat for the past 6 years, was gone. In its place, a newer plate gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Orion Feldman, CEO. Just like that. I froze, one foot slightly ahead of the other, still holding the lukewarm coffee I'd picked up from the break room, as if that version of the morning still existed. The room didn't wait for me to speak. Elgin cleared his throat. "We've made a change," he said, in the same calm, measured tone he used to suggest sandwich orders on Thursdays. "Orion will be stepping in as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately." Orion rose from his chair, smooth as theater. His smile was polished, too wide, too bright, the kind people practice in front of mirrors. "I'm honored to take on this role," he said. "Looking forward to collaborating with all of you closely." He meant over you, but no one blinked. I didn't speak. Couldn't. My body went through the motions. I moved toward an empty seat near the window, opened my notebook, clicked my pen. I didn't ask for my seat back. No one offered it. No one said my name. The meeting rolled forward like a train I was no longer allowed to board. Financials, forecasts, client targets. Orion stammered through numbers I knew by heart, projections I had built, tested, refined. Isolde corrected him once or twice, gently, like she was easing a child through a piano recital. I kept my face blank. I wrote what I could, though I wasn't sure why. Out of habit, maybe, out of dignity. My pen scratched quietly against the paper, the only sign I was still there. When the meeting ended, I didn't wait. I stood, walked out without a word, straight to my office. Closed the door. The sound of it shutting seemed louder than it should have been. Everything looked the same, but nothing did. The books on my shelf, arranged by color. The succulent someone gave me when we signed our Series B. The ribbon-cutting photo, framed in matte black wood. All of it remained, but it wasn't mine anymore. Not really, it was a shrine, a fossil. My breathing turned shallow. I needed air, but not the kind you get outside. I needed movement. I needed to prove I still had control over something, anything. I walked to the admin print room, telling myself I'd forgotten a printout. A reason. Any reason. The room was empty. The copier hummed softly, its screen blinking idle. On the corner of the table, a folder lay unattended. A single sheet stuck out slightly, the corner bent like someone had pulled it out halfway, then thought better of it. Internal Transition Planning Executive Reallocation. The words landed like a punch to the throat. I opened it, slowly, carefully, like peeling back a wound. Inside were spreadsheets, rollout schedules, press templates, pre-written emails, detailed steps mapped out week by week, names assigned to tasks. My name appeared once, under logistical coordination. No input, no acknowledgement, no gratitude. The first document was dated 3 months ago. 3 months. That entire time, I'd been running full tilt pulling late nights, onboarding new staff, smoothing over client concerns, defending budget allocations. I'd turned down 2 vacations, missed my nephew's piano recital, stayed through a holiday snowstorm to finalize Q1. While they had been planning my exit, I felt myself sink onto the low cabinet beside the printer, the cold metal pressing into the backs of my legs. I couldn't tell how long I sat there, maybe 5 minutes, maybe more. The folder rested beside me, heavy with betrayal. Eventually, I stood, walked back to my office, and turned off the light. For a moment, I just stood there in the dim, staring into my own outline against the window. There was no breakdown, no yelling, just stillness, like the inside of a locked vault. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't about growth or direction or vision. This wasn't a mistake, I whispered to the dark. It was a strategy. And then I pulled out a blank notebook, the one I kept tucked in the back drawer, the one I hadn't opened in years. I uncapped my pen, and I started writing again. Not about projections, not about meetings, but about the truth. Mine. Because they may have taken the title, but I still had the story. They thought I would leave quietly. They didn't realize I was starting something. I didn't slam doors. I didn't yell. I wrote. I arrived early that morning. The parking lot was still half empty, the sun just beginning to warm the tinted glass on the west side of the building. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to decide if I felt more numb or more focused. The line between the two had blurred since Tuesday, but I walked in. Head high. Like nothing had changed, because outwardly, nothing had. My badge still beeped green. My title still read COO in the HR system. My name was still on the directory, but I could feel it like a coat that no longer fit, but you wear anyway, hoping it might still button. In my office, I opened my laptop and waited for the familiar loading sound. Then I saw the email. Subject line, welcoming our new CEO, Orion Feldman. It was from Isolde, sent to all staff. The newsletter was glossy, corporate perfect, complete with a high-res headshot of Orion in the executive suite, sleeves rolled just enough to seem approachable. His innovative vision will guide Anderson Group into a dynamic future, it said. There was a paragraph about forward momentum, a section about global potential, and a quote from Elgin about Orion's strategic clarity. There wasn't a single mention of me. Not a line about continuity, or thanks, or my 12 years of infrastructure work. I scrolled to the bottom. The sender list included me. They knew I'd see it. That was the point. A knock at the door startled me. My assistant, Erin, peeked in, eyes unsure. Hey, I didn't write the newsletter, she said quickly. Marketing drafted it. I just forwarded it like I always do. I nodded. You don't need to explain. But we both knew what had happened. I was no longer the subject of the sentence. I wasn't even a comma. I had become the silent space between paragraphs, present but unacknowledged. An hour later, someone from facilities stopped by. Hi, Briona, he said, half smiling. Quick heads up, they're moving Orion into the West Conference Room. The exec suite next to it will be converted into his private office. I stared at him. That room used to be my workshop, my overflow war room. I used to write on the whiteboards until my wrists hurt. He waited for a response. I gave him one. I'll move my things out by the end of the day. In the lobby, I needed air. Needed to move. I took the stairs instead of the elevator 4 floors down, then walked out toward the front desk, where natural light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I stopped short when I saw it. 2 men in uniforms were adjusting the main lobby signage. Ladders were up. Dust was settling on the tile. The company name, Anderson and Daughters, had been polished away. In its place, Anderson Group reimagined for the future. It was subtle but deliberate, like someone erasing a middle name from a tombstone. I stared as one of the workers peeled off the last of the lettering. He didn't notice me, or maybe he did and didn't know what to say. A security guard behind the desk gave me a nod. The polite kind people give to someone who no longer holds power, but still walks like they might. I walked slowly back to my office, each step echoing. I thought about the first time that sign had gone up gold leaf letters. Darla's, hand on my shoulder, whispering, "You'll carry this farther than we ever dreamed." I believed her, but now there was no shoulder, no words, just emails I wasn't meant to answer and signs I wasn't meant to stop. Back in my chair, I didn't cry. That part of me had been squeezed dry long before. I opened the newsletter one last time, reread it, then deleted it. Then I created a new folder on my desktop, Operations Log Legacy Notes. I began dragging documents into it, internal process maps, contract playbooks, revised budgeting templates, all mine. I knew where everything lived, every structure, every sequence, every shortcut that made this place function behind the scenes had my fingerprints on it. They thought I'd disappear. No. I was archiving the foundation they forgot. I knew, no, this wasn't just replacement. It was erasure. And I was done watching. I wasn't ready to confront them, not yet. But I wasn't about to play along either. So when Darla texted that we were still having our usual Saturday dinner, I didn't cancel. I went. Driving to the house in Edina felt like sliding back into a skin I'd already outgrown. The brick looked the same, the shrubs were trimmed just like always. But the second I stepped through the front door, I felt it, that tight, staged energy. The kind you feel at funerals when people smile too much to avoid crying. Darla was in the kitchen, humming something cheerful and slightly off-key. Isolde's laugh floated from the dining room, sharp and performative. Orion's voice followed, a smooth baritone about new branding strategies. It was like they were filming a commercial and forgot to tell me I was no longer part of the cast. I excused myself to the study, while Darla stirred a pot of something meant to smell like comfort. The room still smelled faintly of her lavender oil diffuser and Elgin's old cigar box. Same leather-bound books, same faint scuff on the floor, where his office chair always dragged too wide. But the photos had changed. One frame, newer than the others, caught my eye. Gold-edged, clean, centered perfectly on the shelf. It was a picture from the annual company Galeone I had planned down to the napkin colors and AV scripting. I was there that night. I remembered the exact dress I wore, the extra flats in my tote bag for when the heels wore me out. I remembered coordinating Orion's talking points backstage while he practiced in the mirror. But I wasn't in the photo. The image showed Elgin, Darla, Isolde, and Orion standing in front of our branded step and repeat backdrop, arms linked, all teeth and confidence. I had stood just off to the right in the original. I remembered because I had handed Orion a lint roller moments before it was taken. Yet in this version, I was cropped out, literally. The right edge of the photo was sliced clean me sleeve, my shape, my part in it, gone. Darla appeared in the doorway just as I leaned closer. "That's the best shot we had," she said, her tone light, her smile breezy, like it hadn't just landed a punch. You know how those event photographers are, always cutting people off. I turned and offered a practice smile. Sure, but I wasn't stupid. I wasn't edited out by accident. I was edited out because I didn't fit their version of the story anymore. Dinner was bland. Not the food, Darla's sweet potatoes still carried the same nutmeg-heavy charm, but the conversation. It was like background noise written by an intern. Isolde led the room like she was hosting a podcast. Elgin offered the occasional grunt of approval. Orion talked about his upcoming interview with a regional business journal, how the timing couldn't be better for the rebrand. They spoke as if I hadn't just been scraped from the company wall. At one point, Isolde lifted her wine glass and said, "It's so great to finally have a face people trust at the helm." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because something inside me quit and sharp clicked into place. I had been trying to understand what this was. Now I knew. They weren't just choosing someone else. They were choosing to forget I had ever been there to begin with. Later that night, in the room I used to sleep in during summers home from college, I lay on the guest mattress, staring at the ceiling fan blades slowly circling like they always did. My old bookshelf was still intact, but my frame degree had been replaced with a photo of Isolde and Orion at a startup conference. I picked up my phone and opened a note. Just 2 words. Proof matters. Because one day, someone would challenge the version of this story they were so carefully curating. And when that day came, I wouldn't be erased, it'd be undeniable. I wasn't lost. I was being buried, neatly, politely, and I wasn't about to let them finish the job. Monday morning started like it always did. I reviewed my notes, skimmed the weekly operations checklist I'd prepared, and gathered the folder I'd updated late Sunday night more out of habit than duty. That quiet part of me still hoped someone would notice I hadn't stopped working, hadn't stepped aside. But I knew better. The boardroom on the executive floor looked strangely quiet as I approached. No sound of laptops booting, no shuffle of coffee cups on the long mahogany table. I checked the time. I was early, but not by much. The meeting had always started at 9. I opened the door anyway. The room wasn't empty. Orion stood at the far end, clicker in hand, mid-slide. His voice dropped mid-sentence when he saw me. Isolde sat near the center, jaw tightening so slightly it was almost unnoticeable. The rest of the room followed suit, eyelets like dropped glass. No one said anything. No one offered a chair. I scanned the space. My usual seat, too, down from the head, was occupied by a junior marketing manager I'd mentored last year. She had the decency to look away. On the far wall, the screen displayed a new quarterly flowchart, a structure I recognized, one I built. An intern, no older than 22, stood awkwardly to the side and gestured toward a plastic stool near the trash can. "You can if you want, I didn't want." I stood. Watched. Orion cleared his throat. "Let's continue," he said too loudly. As I was saying, our Q3 strategy integrates a fresh operational funneliner, tighter touchpoints, simplified back-end management. He clicked forward. A new slide appeared. Color-coded boxes, precise arrows, department overlaps. All of it looked familiar. Too familiar. I'd drawn that exact workflow 3 months ago. My layout, my terms. Even the color scheme matched the custom palette I'd created for a client-facing deck. He hadn't changed the margins. No source credit, no acknowledgement, not a word. The room nodded along. Someone asked about analytics load. Orion answered with buzzwords he barely understood, repeating phrases I had coined. And when he stumbled over a metric, Isolde stepped in, smoothly adjusting the phrasing, handing him a term I'd used in our old strategy session. I scanned the room for a single ally. Not one person met my eye. At the end, Orion beamed. "That concludes the operational portion. Let's move to media." No one clapped, but no one questioned him either. After they adjourned, I waited until the last intern shuffled out. I walked to the whiteboard on the side wall, normally wiped clean between meetings. Today, it held 3 bullet points in dry erase ink: vendor streamlining, calendar consolidation, and account pivot logic. My handwriting. Still there. They hadn't even bothered to erase it before calling it theirs. I didn't speak. Didn't ask for an explanation. Instead, I pulled my flash drive from my jacket pocket, walked to the central console, and downloaded the full slide deck. Quietly. Efficiently. Back in my office, I set the flash drive on my desk and opened my notebook. I wrote one sentence in black ink, each word as deliberate as a signed check. Next time they use my work, they'll pay licensing. Then, I flipped the page and began a list. Everything that still ran because of me: projects, systems, clients, templates. Every foundation Orion now stood on had my signature buried in its seams. I would excavate them all. I wasn't looking to win a fight. But I wasn't planning to lose quietly either. The moment he called me too emotional for strategy, I knew he underestimated the one thing I never advertised: restraint. And that mistake was going to cost him. It started with a calendar ping at 7:12 a.m. Subject line: Stakeholder Review Room 4C. Sender: Isolde. No message, just the slot. It wasn't a standard invite, those came weeks ahead. This one was surgical, timed, precise. I stared at it for 5 seconds, maybe less. Then clicked accept. The meeting was set for 11:30. By 8:00, I was at my desk, going over our last quarterly operations plan, margin projections, budget overruns, any lever I could pull, to remind them I was more than just an outdated title. At 10:15, I printed out my own report, labeled it in plain Helvetica, reality check. When I walked into room 4C, Orion was already standing at the front. Isolde sat directly to his left, flanked by 2 junior directors. The room was fuller than expected, 3 board members I hadn't seen in weeks, and a few senior managers who normally skipped these unless donuts were promised. "Glad you could join us, Briona," Orion said smoothly, gesturing toward an empty seat like it hadn't been saved just seconds earlier. I sat down. No handshake, no small talk. He launched into his presentation. "As we enter the final stretch of Q3, we're refining our narrative," he said, sliding through mock-ups of marketing blurbs, influencer headshots, and color-coded outreach tiers. The voice is younger, the tone decisive. We're removing friction. I held my tongue until slide 7. That's where the fantasy started unraveling. He described a streamlined vendor pivot model. His words: "My strategy." "Quick question," I said, keeping my tone even. "How are we protecting against Q4 vendor backlog if you're dropping the redundancy cushion?" He paused, just for a beat, then smiled like a pastor who'd been asked about sin at a wedding. "I appreciate your passion, Briona," he said, eyes flicking toward the board, "but sometimes it's hard to take criticism seriously when it's emotionally charged." The air left the room. Nobody laughed. Someone coughed short, awkward, desperate for release. I didn't blink. "I'm sorry," I said, standing. "Would you mind if I clarify 3 items in your deck?" Orion shrugged. "Go ahead." I reached into my folder, pulled out the reality check packet, and laid it flat on the table. "First," I said, "the redundancy cushion isn't theoretical. It saved us $1.2 million during the February vendor fallout. Second, the friction you're referencing is actually a contract safeguard section 4B, paragraph 2, put in place after the Charlotte project almost defaulted. Third, and most important, emotion didn't write that policy." I did. I let that settle. One of the board members shifted. Another nodded faintly, eyes scanning my sheet. No one rushed to defend me. But no one defended him either. After the meeting, I left without gathering my things. I didn't need to. I knew what I'd brought to the room, and what I'd left there. Isolde caught up with me halfway down the hall. "Briona," she said, voice low. "That wasn't personal. Don't make it bigger than it is." I stopped, turned. "If it gets any bigger," I said, "it'll break your glass office." She didn't reply. Back in my office, I slipped off my shoes and sat quietly, pulled the flash drive from my coat pocket and plugged it in. Replayed the clip I'd recorded during the meeting. My voice, measured, clear. His? Smooth at first, then slippery. I saved the file under a new folder. Undermined publicly v1.wav. I stared at the screen. It didn't scream. It didn't threaten. It just existed. And that, I knew, was enough. The file sat quietly on my desktop, but it was the loudest thing in the room. They wanted silence. What they got was structure-papered, stamped, and backed by law. The message came in just before lunch. I was skimming my inbox, mostly vendor replies and auto notifications, when I saw the name. Carl Tillman, retired accountant, used to run our financial back end during the rocky years before the modernization. I hadn't spoken to him since the restructuring, but his email was short and clean. I have something you'll want to see. Hard copy only. Meet me in the lower lot in 30. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat, told Aaron I was stepping out for a few, and walked 2 blocks to the side parking structure. He was waiting in a dusty Buick, engine running. Didn't even look up when I slid into the passenger seat. He handed me a tan folder. Confidential capital contributions. Read it later, he said. You didn't get it from me. Back at the office, I locked my door and opened the file. Page 1, a ledger entry. Year 2019. Line item $275,000. Memo. Emergency bridge OPEX buffer. My name was typed cleanly in the original contribution column. Page 2, a follow-up memo. Attached amendment. It had been relogged, folded into the General Executive Reserve, then reassigned recredited under Orion's financial backing, leveraging a clause I vaguely remembered signing in the early days. I had contributed a 6-figure lifeline when the company was weeks from collapse, and now it sat on someone else's record as proof of leadership investment. I felt my stomach tighten, but I didn't panic. I got up, crossed the hall, and walked straight into the legal archives room. The lighting in there was always dim, the carpet just a little too thin. I sat down at the old research terminal, logged in, and began pulling up the original agreements. The clause was buried deep. Nestled under contingency consolidation, it granted discretionary fund reallocation under executive title transitions with no required notification to secondary contributors. Technically, they hadn't broken the rules, but they had bent them so far, the paper should have snapped. I took photos, all of it, printed 3 copies, saved 1 to my drive, left nothing open on the screen. As I was packing up, I checked my inbox again. That's when I saw it, subject line, Ops timeline, eyes only. It had been CC'd to me accidentally. A thread between Orion and Isolde. 5 emails deep, strategy talk, meeting prep. But then, there it was, clean and sharp. She's not a threat. She'll get tired and walk. I sat there for a long moment. Reading it, rereading it. I didn't respond. I didn't forward it. I downloaded it quietly, saved it in the same folder as the audio clip from the stakeholder meeting. Then I stood up, walked calmly back to my office, and wrote a single-line email to Orion. Per protocol, I am initiating a formal audit of all executive ownership transfers dated FY 2021 onward. I hit send. 10 minutes later, I heard a door slam across the hall. Hard. No one said anything. But even through the glass, I could feel the shift. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground under me settle. They hadn't just crossed a line. They'd handed me the pen. That evening, as the sky darkened behind my window, I opened a new digital vault on my hard drive. Named it Foundations They Forgot. Inside it, I placed 3 files: the investment ledger, the email thread, the audio file. I stared at the folder icon for a long time. Then I opened a blank document and began writing a legal draft that would make them remember. They'd built a legacy on my silence. Now it'd use their own signatures to rewrite it. But before Monday arrived, before I made it official, I had to survive Sunday. It was Isolde's idea of family brunch at her place. No business talk, she'd texted. Just waffles and peace. I almost declined. But I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to feel what they looked like when they pretended we were still whole. Their house was bright, unnaturally so. Everything was curated, the playlist low and inoffensive. The scent of citrus candles thick in the air. Isolde buzzed between the kitchen and the patio table, like she was auditioning for a hosting segment on morning TV. Orion played tag in the backyard with our niece Lila, who wore a unicorn headband and sticky maple fingers. Darla was already seated, pouring coffee like it meant something. Elgin, as always, was buried in his Sunday Times, reading as though the world depended on his silence. I took a seat quietly. No one asked about my week. No one mentioned the audit request. The table filled with food and empty conversation. Isolde talked about flooring samples for the office remodel. Orion mentioned how press opportunities were ramping up, which made Darla nod like she'd just seen a prophecy fulfilled. Then came the question. Lila, mid-sip of orange juice, looked up at me and asked, Aunt Briona, is it true you're not working at the company anymore because Uncle Orion is better at it? Time didn't stop, it tripped. Isolde's face froze mid-smile. Orion chuckled and looked down. Darla set her napkin gently on her lap. Elgin didn't move. I looked at Lila. Her question wasn't cruel. It was curiosity raw, honest, echoing what she'd heard at dinner tables or behind closed office doors. That was the worst part. I smiled gently. Excuse me, sweetheart, I said, rising. I found the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and let my fists press into my knees. Not because I wanted to cry, but because I needed to hold something still, anything. They had rewritten the story so thoroughly that even an 8-year-old knew my chapter had been erased. I didn't stay long after that. I made some polite excuse about a contractor coming to look at the pipes in my building. No one asked if it was true. By evening, I was back in my apartment, my coat still on, boots leaving a trail across the hardwood. I didn't take them off. I opened my laptop and checked my messages. There it was. A LinkedIn message from Claire, an intern from 5 years ago. Thought you'd want to see this? It's going viral. A link followed. I clicked. The post didn't have a byline, it simply read, The woman who built a legacy and watched it be rebranded. Underneath were 2 paragraphs. One described a female executive who'd laid the operational foundation for a mid-size firm. The other described how her contributions were absorbed, her title reassigned, her presence vanished without conflict, only silence. It didn't say my name. It didn't need to. The comment section was a cascade. Former employees, vendors, anonymous profiles I didn't recognize, but I recognized the voices. She trained me. I still use her hiring process. We never missed a deadline until she stopped managing timelines. Funny how success looks like the guy who showed up last. I sat back. The light from the screen flickered across the framed certificate above my desk, the one they had once insisted I hang in the lobby. I stared at it and felt nothing. Then I hit print. I walked to the kitchen, pulled the magnet off the side of the fridge that once held the old company org chart, and replaced it with the post. Underneath, I wrote in permanent marker, Let's see who shows up when I finally claim myself. The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning. But maybe the chill wasn't in the air, it was in the way no one met my eyes. In the way even my own hands trembled slightly as I rested them on the polished table. I hadn't said a word since entering. Neither had my attorney. He sat to my left, calm and unreadable, dressed in a charcoal suit that carried the weight of seriousness, of truth. Across the table, Orion looked far too comfortable for someone who should have been nervous. One leg crossed over the other, fingers steepled in forced ease, lips curled just enough to make me want to walk out before it even began. But I stayed seated. I waited until the room settled, until the eyes on me began to shift from curiosity to discomfort. Then, slowly and deliberately, I laid down 5 sealed envelopes, one in front of each board member. The shuffle of paper was the only sound for a moment. Elgin, I said quietly, addressing the oldest board member directly. You once told me something I've never forgotten. You said, paper only matters when someone else can read it. So I brought copies. They looked down. Some blinked. Others opened their envelopes without hesitation. Inside were the certified documents. The amended version of our late father's will. The one submitted quietly 2 years ago. The one that removed my name entirely from the ownership clause, without my knowledge, without my consent. The one that conveniently transferred majority shares of Anderson Group to Orion and Isolde. I never signed off on this, I said clearly. And I was never notified this revision even existed. Orion's composure cracked ever so slightly. He adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. This feels like a misunderstanding. You know how these legal documents are. The phrasing, there's always room for interpretation. No, I replied, my voice steady and low. What you misunderstood is that paper leaves trails. I tapped the table twice. My attorney reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small speaker. He pressed play. The boardroom, still stiff and cold, was suddenly filled with Orion's voice, confident, smug, from the last closed-door stakeholder meeting. Sometimes it's hard to take criticism seriously when it's emotionally charged, he had said. The second recording followed immediately. Isolde's voice, clipped and dismissive. Don't make it bigger than it is. It's done. When the final audio faded, I handed out one last documenté printout of a viral LinkedIn post. No names were mentioned in the post, but it had over 400,000 shares, tens of thousands of comments. Anonymous, yes, but everyone in the industry knew exactly who it was about. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the AC, the soft shuffle of someone's nervous foot beneath the table. No one rushed to apologize. No one argued. But something shifted. Then, finally, a voice broke through. An older board member, soft-spoken, respected, and rarely involved in conflict, cleared his throat. We owe you more than we've ever admitted, he said, and perhaps more than we can repay. Orion didn't say a word, not even to deny it. I stood, my hands no longer trembling. You don't need to fix what you broke, I said. You just need to stop pretending it never happened. No one tried to stop me as I left. Downstairs, someone had planned a birthday celebration for Orion. Cupcakes, gold balloons, and an awkward rendition of Happy Birthday rising from the open floor. I walked through it unnoticed. Or maybe just unacknowledged. A woman tried to hand me a plate with a cupcake chocolate with gold sprinkles. I took it, smiled, said thank you. Across the room, Orion was cutting into a sheet cake. His name was spelled wrong Orion. I didn't correct it. As I exited through the main lobby, I paused in front of the company sign mounted on the marble wall. Anderson Group. But not for long. I'd already submitted the facility's change order that morning. Installation was scheduled for Wednesday. The new signage would read, Anderson and Legacy Partners. When the facilities manager had asked me what Legacy Partners meant, I gave him the simplest answer I had. It means no one gets erased again. That night, I sat at home at my dining table, alone. No phones ringing, no voices justifying betrayal. Just silence, warm lighting, and the hum of my own breath. I pulled out a clean sheet of branded stationery, my branding, my name, and began writing. A single clause. Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we refuse to let be rewritten. I signed it. No co-signers. No need for witnesses. Just me. That was the point. Closure doesn't always come with peace. Sometimes it arrives with boundaries, documents, and a door only you can close. And sometimes, closure doesn't need a crowd. Just a pen. And your own name, written in full. Mine. The plaque outside my office wasn't just metal. It was a mirror-sleek, brushed steel, no name in bold font. Just a quiet logo, etched deep with intention. And if they came looking for answers, they'd see their reflection first. But not everything needed to be reflected anymore. Some things could stay behind the glass. Not hidden. Just no longer invited in. 2 weeks had passed since the boardroom fell silent, and the news broke like glass under pressure. Long enough for headlines to fade, for inboxes to return to normal, for LinkedIn posts to cycle out of relevance. I didn't clarify anything. I didn't write a thread or repost articles. I let the buzz settle and the whispers take over. People always filled in the blanks with whatever made them most comfortable. Let them. While they speculated, I built. My new office didn't look like mush, at least not to them. A second-floor loft tucked just south of downtown. Exposed beams, tall windows, uneven wood floors, and no receptionist. No Art Deco lobby. No sleek conference rooms with glass tables, just clarity. Inside, the space was open, still half empty. ID furnished it slowly, deliberately. A deep green velvet couch it found second-hand, but loved instantly. A standing desk I had assembled myself over one too late night. A coffee pot that only made enough for one. And a single frame hung neatly on the brick wall above the desk. Inside the frame was the viral LinkedIn post, the one that sparked everything, printed on clean, matte cardstock. Beneath the post, in my own handwriting, I'd added one line in black ink. "We don't disappear, we get redrawn." It wasn't a slogan, it was a reminder. For me. For whoever came next. And they did come quietly, steadily. Not because of my last name, not because of family legacy, but because of the work. Founders trying to rebuild after being overlooked. Women trying to re-enter spaces that had spat them out. People who didn't want motivational speeches. They wanted frameworks, systems, solutions. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone rang. The number was familiar. Darla. "We're having a small dinner Sunday," she said. Her voice calm, rehearsed. "Just family. No agenda." I didn't respond right away. I could feel her discomfort filling the silence. "You can leave early, of course," she added quickly. "Like that might make it easier." "I'll come," I said. "But one condition." She waited. 1 hour. No company talk. No updates. Just dinner. She agreed without argument. That surprised me. Sunday came. The Wren house looked the same as it always had, tasteful, towering, untouched. But I had changed. And when I stepped through the front door, I felt the shift immediately. The dining room hadn't gotten smaller, but I no longer tried to fold myself down to fit inside it. Dinner was fine. No champagne toasts, no side glances, no backhanded jabs disguised as concern. Isolde talked about a contract she was working on for a luxury resort. Elgin asked if I was keeping busy. I told him yes. No one asked anything deeper, and maybe that was a gift. But near the end of the meal, after the plates had been cleared, Elgin excused himself and left the room. No one followed. When he returned, he was holding something, a frame. It was the gala photo, the original one, the version that still had me in it. He didn't say anything, just walked over to the wall near the staircase, the spot where the cropped version had once hung. He raised the frame, adjusted it until it was straight, then stepped back, hands at his sides. He didn't glance my way. Darla did, just for a moment. Then she turned and began gathering the last of the glasses, like nothing had happened. I didn't thank him, but I didn't look away. Later, as I helped carry a tray of dessert plates into the kitchen, Isolde brushed past me at the sink. She didn't speak, didn't apologize, didn't offer a bridge. We didn't need one. Some distances aren't meant to be crossed. At the front door, I reached for my coat. Darla stood beside me. Her hand hovered, like she wanted to say something, maybe touch my arm, but she didn't. "I'll stop expecting you to understand," I said quietly, "if you stop pretending you already do." She blinked once, then gave a small nod. Not agreement, just acknowledgement. That was enough. Back in my apartment, I turned off the overhead lights. Let the lamp by the window cast its soft glow over the hardwood floors. The city beyond shimmered quiet, alive, pulsing with energy I didn't need to chase anymore. I sat at my desk, the one I'd built with my own hands. I opened my notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote, "They couldn't give me what I needed, so I became what I needed." I closed the notebook gently. Not everything had healed, but everything had moved. And for now, for the first time in a long time, that was finally, blessedly, enough.